his captains, Pastor John Gano. So Washington was under very heavy Baptist and Calvinist influence in being encouraged to conduct that war. So what he did was he broke the temporal power of the Pope through King George III, because the Jesuits were in total control of England through the king. And when the colonies broke away, they hated King George for that and his failures to secure this, because meanwhile the Jesuits are conducting their Napoleonic Wars, trying to get back the Vatican and the Roman Catholic monarchies of Europe. So Washington was a condemned heretic pursuant to the Council of Trent and to the Jesuit oath. And when I was at a Stout's restaurant here in Womelsdorf, just a little town next to me, Washington, with his troops, had stopped in there during the Revolution, and the guy that owns it's a nice old man, plays a wonderful piano. And there was an individual who, here on the East Coast, plays the part of George Washington. And he happened to come to Stout's restaurant. And according to this individual, with the research that he had done, he said Washington died of anthrax poisoning. So I have no doubt, and this is a favorite poisoning of the Jesuits. This is what they used on the Native American Indians, lacing anthrax in the blankets that they gave to them. But anthrax was one of their favorite poisonings. And so Washington died within 2 days of, I believe, anthrax poisoning at the hands of a doctor.
An interesting thing also, if you go back and you read the Treaty of Paris, which supposedly ended the Revolutionary War, it was written by England. Aren't the supposed losers not supposed to draft the terms? And in that, King George, in one of his explanations, egotistically of what he is, the something of this and the something of that, he was called the Electorate of the Holy Roman Empire.
Right.
And that is huge. And of course, I have friends who say, well, that's impossible. England broke away from Catholicism, so how can that be?
No, the royal families still maintain their bonds. And that's what most people don't see. The royal families are ultimately still loyal to the Vatican. And what keeps them from an outright open alignment is the population dependent on how much they read the Reformation Bible, the King James Bible. So King George III, his father, King George II, was truly not involved with the Vatican. He conducted the 7 Years' War. He was in alignment with Germany. I mean, it was, I believe, the last true European war that was for the benefit of Protestantism. But George III, when he came to power, I think it was 1760, was totally in the hands of the Jesuits. And as an elector of the Holy Roman Empire, he maintained that position, but Napoleon destroyed the Holy Roman Empire in 1806, put a formal end to it.
And we'll go into that a little bit later on. And also, I mean, would you not agree that the Vatican and the monarchies were not happy that the fact that Washington refused to be king?
Absolutely. They hated George Washington with a passion. George Washington was the absolute antithesis to everything they wanted here. He was not a divine writer, although he could have been. He was of noble birth. But George Washington was a born-again, Bible-believing, Protestant, heavily influenced Baptist Calvinist man. At 14 years of age, he wrote 110 maxims of good behavior. I mean, this man was a soldier. He was a man of honor. He was a man of private wealth. He freed all of his slaves at the time of his death, including his beloved Billy Lee, who is in one of his portraits, his favorite portraits, as you can see at the DuPont Mansion in Delaware. Washington was hated by the monarchs of Europe because he refused to go along with what would later be embodied in the doctrines of the Holy Alliance. So he had to go. He was a condemned heretic. He dealt a tremendous blow to the Jesuits who were in control of England. And by securing the First Amendment to the Constitution, securing freedom of worship, that is utterly condemned by the Jesuits' Council of Trent.
Now, we move away from Washington. Not a real big deal with John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe. So far, so good, okay?
Okay.
Nothing nefarious there?
Nothing, no.
John Quincy Adams? No.
I'm surprised he didn't kill him.
Why do you say that?
Because John Quincy Adams was the great anti-Masonic president. Remember, the anti-Masonic movement began at the time of his presidency, and he openly condemned the institution of Masonry as barbaric. And as a result of the murder of Captain William Morgan up in the Niagara Gorge, there were approximately 40 to 50,000 Northern Masons who seceded from Freemasonry and began to tell their story, so much so that there became what was known as the Anti-Masonic Party. So this particular president, John Quincy Adams, was a staunch resistor of this, and yet he seems to live to his full term. He doesn't touch the Vatican, however, to my knowledge.
All right, and we're not going to split hairs here, but did Morgan's death happen during John Quincy Adams' presidency or during Jackson's?
Morgan's death happened in the 1820s.
Okay, all right.
John Quincy Adams, his presidency
was 1825 to 29.
Okay, that was during his death, right? During his presidency.
I like to tell you.
1828.
I like to tell you I remember that, but no, I've got it in front of me. And also, I want to let people know that a really good resource for at least getting the chronological and the main stats about presidents is to go to POTUS. It would be IPL. POTUS, Internet Public Library, POTUS.org, and they have them all listed there. It's a good resource, at least with the straight skinny, if you know what I mean. Mm-hmm. Now we go to, and of course, Andrew Jackson.
Okay. Andrew Jackson was another Bible believer. Andrew Jackson was another born-again, saved man of God, who said to all his slaves who gathered round his deathbed, "Don't cry, dear children," he said, "we shall all meet again in heaven." He said, "Oh, do not cry. Be good children, we will all meet in heaven." So Jackson, he also said that the Bible is the bedrock upon which this republic rests. So here we have the maxims of bringing biblical principles into the political arena without the merger of church and state, which of course is forbidden by the First Amendment. Mm-hmm. First Amendment never prohibits bringing in biblical maxims to any arena of life, especially the political arena. And this is what Jackson did. What he did was he did three things that are absolutely forbidden and accursed by the Jesuit order if they're going to reduce a nation to utter servitude. The first thing he did was he was a hard money man. He believed in bimetallism, that gold and silver coins should be in free circulation. And so he promoted that. We shall later see that Garfield was killed for that. He also, because gold and silver coin is honest money, George Washington was behind gold and silver coin with the 1792 Coinage Act, which brought the country out of bankruptcy due to the evil paper money called the Continentals. Jackson also was behind a protective tariff, a high protective tariff, as was George Washington, knowing full well that the American manufacturers could only grow and develop if we had tariffs on incoming goods from foreign manufacturers. If we do not have a high protective tariff, and of course there weren't any of the evil unions in those days, if we don't have a high protective tariff protecting our domestic manufacturers, we can never grow. We can never accommodate a growing population with an industrial infrastructure because that cannot grow, as it is not growing today in this country since NAFTA and GATT has lost 20% of its economic, of its industrial infrastructure. So Jackson was behind a protective tariff. The other thing he did was what he openly resisted Nicholas Biddle's United States Bank.
That's right. He killed the bank.
That's right. He killed the bank. It was chartered in 1816, and they wanted to renew the charter in 1832. Jackson vetoed the renewal of the charter. He was censored by the Senate for it, for which reason James Buchanan later became a Democrat and left the Federalist Party, because James Buchanan loved Jackson. And as a result, Jackson was then on the Jesuit hit list because the Jesuits were controlling the high Masons of the country, which included Nicholas Biddle and the control of the bank. So Jackson, on January 30th, 1835, was the attempted assassination of the president at the Capitol by another lone nut.
Supposedly.
Another supposed lone nut, Richard Lawrence.
And both guns misfired?
That's right. He pulled one pistol, misfired, pulled another one, it misfired. So we see the providence of God in protecting our man of God here. And Jackson chased him and started to beat him over the head with his cane at the ripe old age of 67. I just love him.
Don't you?
Just love him. So the United States Bank was killed under Jackson, and our country went into the black and was the most prosperous it had ever become under his second term.
Also, I mean, about that famous duel he had, probably only eclipsed by the Burr-Hamilton duel, but Jackson knew that when he was faced with his opponent, the opponent was a quicker draw, so he said, I took the shot in my back just to get a better shot. Yeah, okay, buddy. You're all right in my book. I used to be a middle linebacker for the Packers or something. Holy mackerel.
He was tough. Yes, he was.
What a character.
Washington was the creator of our Constitution and Bill of Rights. Jackson was